Here we go, Battle of Concord in Lexington. I'm Mr. Allard again with another A+ Social Studies production. I should probably actually put the word battle here in quotations. These weren't, they were more of skirmishes than anything else, but we'll kind of talk about that as we go along. Hopefully you've got your flip lesson worksheet right there next to you, and let's get going. All right, the Battle of Lexington occurred. Ooh, there's the bell. Don't mind that. Early in the morning on April 19th of 1775. The reason for the battle is basically the colonists had kind of known that there may be a chance that some fighting may be breaking out, especially in Massachusetts and Boston, where a lot of different issues were going on that we've talked about in class. So they began to kind of hoard weapons and train the militia, and the British soldiers and British leadership had kind of figured this out, and so they marched to Lexington to do two things. Number one, they wanted to arrest colonial leaders Sam Adams and John Hancock, who they thought was kind of the brains behind the operation. And they wanted to capture any colonial weapon stores. If they don't have the weapons, they can't fight. So that was kind of what started on the early morning of April 19th, 1775. Here we got a map that kind of shows Lexington and Concord on. They can't really see it. But the Battle of Lexington wasn't really a battle. Calling England the victor is kind of a little bit of a misnomer, but let me describe to you why. The militia that met the British at Lexington was vastly outnumbered. There about 50 of them showed up at Lexington because, you know, as the militia, they have other jobs to do and things like that. And they were going against a force that was in the hundreds. We've had varying estimates from 500 to 700 is usually the key. So they basically kind of met each other in a field, and they were staring at each other for a long time, and a shot rang out, and we're not exactly sure who fired the first shot, but a shot rang out, and the militia opened fire, and Britain opened fire, and then the militia kind of fled and retreated. So there wasn't a whole heck of a lot of fighting. The whole ordeal was over with in roughly about 10 to 15 minutes. But the key is there had been violence in Boston. There had been violence in other places of the colonies. But this was the first time that British troops and American troops, even though they were militia, had fired shots at each other. So the very first time the violence had been between soldiers on a battlefield. So the British soldiers did not find any weapons, did not find Sam Adams or John Hancock in Lexington, so they continued on to Concord in the afternoon of April 19, 1775. The colonists had kind of gone through and been warned about what was happening. Paul Revere's ride, we've all heard of, was happening and allowed the colonists to gather. More colonial militia gathered at the town of Concord, which was kind of the next along the road. And they chose to defend there against the British advance. And now the militia was closer into the hundreds. We had about number estimates anywhere from 500 to 1,000 colonial militiamen that had gathered on Concord Green. The British troops kept advancing. A battle took place at Concord Bridge, which you can kind of see up there in the corner. And the funny thing that happened that nobody really expected is the colonials held their ground. The militia held their ground on the bridge. They were kind of helped by the tactics. You know, a narrow bridge, the soldiers couldn't advance at them as they would like, but they held their ground. They fought. British soldiers perished. American soldiers perished, and it forced the British soldiers rather to retreat. And along the retreat, what we're going to see is the Americans kept attacking the British soldiers through what today we would call kind of sniper fire, fire from the woods, fire from hidden locations. Oh, there's the bell again. Because what we've seen, remember we talked about the French and Indian War, the British are still wearing those bright red uniforms that kind of stick out in the forest. The British wanted the colonial weapons. They didn't really see any colonial weapons there. We're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves. Here we go with kind of what I was talking about earlier with the Americans winning. All right. This was the big impact here is this is the first actual battle. The colonists and British had both showed that they're willing to fight and in some cases die for their cause. Britain was so into their cause of keeping the colonies that they were willing to fight and die for it, and the colonists were so into their cause of freedom that they were willing to fight and die for it. And it was a show that, maybe maybe our differences are too much here. All right, let's look at what we're going to be doing tonight. All right, for our SOS statement, again, we looked at this in class. We should already have the statement in our own words. You're going to agree or disagree with that statement, and then you are going to support the opinion, whether or not you agreed or disagreed, with evidence from what we just did with our flipped lesson. All right, if you have any questions or anything like that, as always, give me a shout on Edmodo. I'll try to get to them as quickly as possible. If not, enjoy your half day and be ready to go tomorrow with looking at some more primary source documents. Have a good one.